Now you're all set.
All right, we will now open the public meeting for the Conservation Commission of Tuesday, April 19th, 2022 at 7:00 p.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 30A, Chapter 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This public meeting of the Town of Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment. Guidelines for participants: please utilize the chat or raise hand functions to address the board. Remain on mute until you've been addressed by the board chair. And participants are required to display first and last names. We will now take a roll call. I am Emily Winter.
I'm Bill Payne.
Laurie Stevenson.
Paul Brandwald.
Rebecca Longbaugh.
Okay, we will start by opening our first item. We have Lauren de la Para. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing, of Lydian Solutions, and Jillian Davies of BSC Group to discuss the current MVP and Nashua Rivers Communities Resilient Lands Management Project.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily. Rebecca, did you want to say something there?
Nope, I was just going to note to Emily that you were both present.
Great. Awesome. And am I able to share my screen?
You should be now.
Perfect. Let me just pull up the slideshow. All right. Is everyone seeing that? Great. And if I make it full screen, does it look full screen to you? Awesome. Thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Lauren, as Emily mentioned, and I am a climate and sustainability planner with Lydian Solutions. I've been helping to manage this project over the past almost year now, 9 months, I guess. And I've had the pleasure of working with Rebecca and others in the region on several MVP action grants over the past few years, notably the Apple Country Natural Climate Solutions Project, which really precipitated the project that we're talking about today, which is the Nashua River Communities Resilient Lands Management Project. I'm just here to give a quick overview of the project as a whole, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague at BSC Group, Jillian Davies, who is a wetlands scientist and expert in the field, and she's going to get into the wetlands-focused regulatory review process that has been a key component of this project. So, to start with a quick overview of the project as a whole, it's a 2-year project and we're in the first year, working together with the towns of Bolton and Clinton to identify strategies for enhancing climate resilience through land use and land management, with an emphasis on natural lands and nature-based solutions. And the project as a whole is guided by 2 primary processes, kind of represented in this diagram here. And the first, which is starting at the top left, is looking at land use and land management from a community perspective, and really driven by 2 core groups, one of which is called the core team. And that's a group of folks from across the whole community, as well as a forest task group, which is in year 1, which is a group of more sort of specialized experts focusing specifically on forested landscapes. In year 2 of the project, we'll be convening a task group focused specifically on what we call turf and ornamental landscapes, which is really managed grassy landscapes, things like lawns, gardens, parks, and playing fields. So concurrently, there's this other process starting on the bottom left that is looking at all of these issues from a regulatory perspective, and that's what we're really going to focus on here tonight. This element of the project is being led by town staff and collaborators at the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions and others on the consulting team, and this process spans the full 2 years of the project. One thing that this slide tries to emphasize is really that these two processes are not independent. They are intersecting and iterative, and they involve significant internal and community review. And our goal is to keep each of these groups informed and engaged with the work of the others so that they can strengthen each other's outputs to drive more meaningful action over the long run. So I'll just talk about the sort of overall deliverables for the project. And the first key output for year one is a project website, which is now live and in both English and Spanish. And I would especially encourage folks to check out the project story tab, which has kind of an overall review of what we've been up to so far this year, a data viewer, which has a lot of really awesome mapping resources that BSC has put together, and it's just really beautiful, and the forests tab, which is really going to help folks get a deeper sense of what the forest task group has been up to as well. Not sure if Rebecca or Jillian, you have the link handy to the website. I will have to exit my presentation to share it, but it'd be great to point folks to that so that everyone can take a look when they have a moment. Then, as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, we've also been working to develop principles for forest management and care in collaboration with the Forest Task Group. And that process is going to form the basis for developing a set of community-driven guides to forest stewardship and care that we'll be creating, we're starting to create right now, actually. And then last but certainly not least, we've developed a series of wetlands and development focused, what we're calling opportunity matrices, which are just really in-depth spreadsheets that we've tried to make as user-friendly as possible, with the additional note that we will be creating an even more user-friendly interface for folks to interact with these as a next step in the project. And these are intended to further support the town's decision-making around land use and land management. And as I mentioned, we'll be getting into more detail about these later in the presentation. And these deliverables are outputs of a process that's really about supporting community capacity and enabling capability to take action on climate change through collaborative and inspired care for our landscapes. And thanks for sharing that link, both of you.
Yeah, at the
Same time.
Awesome. So here's a quick timeline of what we've been up to. The core team has met twice and is going to be meeting one more time before the end of this year, and the core team will be engaged throughout the full 2 years of the process, so they'll be meeting another 3 times next year. The Forest Task Group has also met twice so far and will be meeting again actually next week. We've done 2 forest site visits on the ground in the towns, going to different forested sites to see what's actually happening on the ground and to talk, have really in-depth place-specific conversations with stakeholders about potential strategies and actions that we can take to improve climate resilience. And then we've had this regulatory review process that's focused, as I mentioned, both on sort of the development context in the towns and then really in depth on the wetlands regulatory context in the towns. And that's been ongoing since last fall and will conclude this summer with final versions of the opportunity matrices. And then these will be used to develop model bylaws and targeted recommendations for the 2 towns in the next year of the project, so that that's the output for year 2. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Jillian Davies to talk specifically about the wetlands regulatory review process. And did I skip ahead, Jillian?
Yeah. Can you go back a couple slides?
Sorry, kind of froze there for a second. So let's here, right?
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jillian Davies with BSC Group, and as Lauren mentioned, I'm a wetland and soil scientist, and have been enjoying working with Bolton for a few years now on MVP projects. And I was the project manager for Apple Country and have been enjoying this year's project as well. One of the things, as Lauren mentioned, that we wanted to do was to develop climate smart wetland protection bylaws and regulations. And the process that we've used for that has been both to have our project team partner with the MACC Climate Connections Committee, which has been invaluable. And our project team includes Nathaniel Stevens, who's an attorney with McGregor, Legere, and Stevens law firm. And that has helped us to really bring that legal expertise to this as well. Another invaluable partnership. And so I've been working with those groups as well as sharing with the Linnaean folks to do some cross reviewing of our work. And the first thing that we started out with was the Climate Connections Committee developed a survey that was sent to all of the conservation commissions across the state to ask if they have climate provisions integrated into their bylaws and regulations. And if not, are they considering it? And if they do have them, could they send a link or send the bylaws and the regs? And that was really great. And then we reviewed all of those towns that said, yes, we do have them. We reviewed all of them, and we are using the MACC model bylaw as the base, and then saying what would we add to the different parts of the MACC model bylaw. There is no model wetlands regulations, set of regulations, and I can tell you that the reason for that is that regulations are a lot longer than bylaws. So we wound up using the Arlington regulations, which Nathaniel Stevens is on the commission there and helped write the Arlington regs. So he's very familiar with them and has good confidence in them as sort of the base. And they do have in Arlington some wetlands climate smart provisions in it already. And then we added things on to that based on what else we were doing. We also reviewed the recent MAPC website for local bylaws that are climate smart. Theirs is broader than just the wetlands, but there was some stuff on there. And we looked at the Audubon bylaw review tool. And then we knew of other climate change bylaws, ordinances, and regs that are out there that just didn't show up in the survey. So we went and looked at those as well. We had a range of municipalities responding, both coastal and inland. And the goal for the project is going to be to produce a generic statewide model, bylaw and model set of regs that any town in the state can use. And that includes the coastal communities. So there's some coastal provisions which are not needed for Bolton or Clinton, the other community in this project. And then in year 2, we will work with Bolton and Clinton to help you modify your existing in Bolton, your existing bylaw and regs to see which of these potential climate smart provisions you want to include in your bylaw, and we'll help draft that up so that you will wind up at the end of the project, June of 2024, with a climate smart bylaw and regs that you can implement in your town to the extent that you want to do that. And we also looked at some others. There's a Cape Cod Commission came out with a coastal resiliency bylaw. There's a Maryland Georgetown Climate Center model sea level rise ordinance. We looked at that. And then we're also we familiarized ourselves with Mass DEP's proposed 2022 wetlands climate regulatory changes, pulled some stuff from that. And yeah, we can, and then just made sure we used up-to-date data. This slide shows the results of the MACC Climate Connection Survey, and the blue towns are the towns that replied and said, yes, we do have climate provisions, either bylaw or regulations. And the orange town said, no, we don't. The yellow town said, we are considering implementing them. And we had responses from about a third of the state. The towns that don't have any coloring did not reply to the survey. So we thought that was a pretty good response rate. And you can see most towns do not yet have climate bylaws and regs, but there is a lot of interest in doing that. And I think we know there's several other MVP projects that are working on communities to do this. So I think it's a direction that a lot of towns are heading in. Could you switch slides? And where we are in the process right now is the feedback. We would love to get feedback. Rebecca shared the spreadsheet of the regulations, and I apologize for what a beast it is. I know it has about 130 different lines, a lot of tiny print. We're aware that that's not going to be the end product because it's not user-friendly enough, but it's what we have right now in draft form. So if you have the time and ability to look through it and provide feedback, we would love to hear from you. The whole Climate Connections Committee is reviewing it right now. Our project team's reviewing it. Hillary King, our regional coordinator for MVP, is reviewing it. And then we were asked by the EEA, Massachusetts Resilient and Working Lands folks, to share our draft spreadsheet with them. And so we asked them to send us any feedback they had. So hopefully we'll get some good feedback. The other thing is that we are close to having a bylaw spreadsheet to share with you. That's actually the easier one. So we're doing it second. We did the harder one first. Right now, the bylaw one only has about 25 lines. So that's going to be much simpler. And you will get that at some point with a request to take a look at that as well. So next slide. In terms of the results, the outputs of this are going to be, as I mentioned, there will be these sort of comprehensive spreadsheets for both the bylaw, Climate Smart bylaw, and Climate Smart regulations. But then starting in our second year of the project, we're going to develop a user-friendly website interface that will allow people to access the information in kind of an organized, simplified way, instead of just having to deal with the spreadsheet. And then in year two, that's when we will meet with you and go and have some more detailed discussions about what particular provisions would you like to see in the Bolton bylaw and regs. Next slide. And then just as a teaser, some of the key recommendations that we're recommending are to expand the interests of your bylaw to include interests that are climate rated that pertain to wetland carbon. As I'm sure you all know, wetlands store a disproportionate amount of the world's soil carbon. They occupy 5 to 8% of the world's land surface and store about 30% of the world's soil carbon. And when we did the Apple Country project last year and assessed the soil carbon in Bolton wetlands, it turned out to be not quite, it was like 15 or 17% of the land was wetlands, and there was about close to 30% of Bolton's soil carbon was in those wetlands. So a similar, they're just carbon banks, very large carbon banks. So both at the local level and globally. And then the other thing is to articulate the climate resilience benefits of the existing interests. All of the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act provide climate resilience. And it's just that the act and the regs were written before we were all that aware of climate, so they're not spelled out as being climate resilient. So we're recommending people do articulate that. And there is one climate resilience benefit that is not identified in the current interest, so that could be added, and that is the provision of localized cooling. So just like a water body cools the area around it, so too do wetlands, because they have so much water in them. And a lot of times the most common type of wetland is a forested wetland, and so in Massachusetts, and so that provides shade as well. Also, with regard to flooding, we're recommending using the most up-to-date data and modeling, which at this point seems to be the NOAA 14++ rainfall data, or predictive modeling. And we're recommending performance standards to assess wetland carbon and climate resilience impacts. Next slide. We also are suggesting creating ecological climate resilience zones and ecological carbon mitigation zones that can add to the buffer zone, to add these areas where wetland resources can migrate up gradient as we get more flooding, and conditions can often be wetter, and that will help protect the benefits that wetlands provide related to climate. You will note in the table there are a number of the rows that are a pale green. They pertain to trees, so you can look for those for tree-like provisions. Stormwater provisions are shaded a sort of a light pale red. The regular, just generic wetlands ones are light blue, and then the coastal provisions, which you can just ignore unless you're interested, those are kind of a pale sandy color. 3 areas in the regs that we particularly focused on for climate provisions are the statements of jurisdiction, the definitions, and the findings and performance standards. So each of those areas you can add climate provisions. Next slide. With regard to findings and performance standards, we're trying to create some of those that would require assessment of impacts to climate-related functions, and require that the best available data sets and modeling be used, particularly regarding rainfall data and flooding. And then recommending conducting an alternatives analysis to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to climate-related functions, and requiring replication of climate-related functions. So replication, wetland replication would not just be a one-to-one aerial replication. And then there's some climate smart best management practices for wetland replication, that including a particular approach called the translocation method, and then advising more stringent performance standards for the buffer zone. So those are some highlights that if you keep your eye out for things along those lines, it might make navigating the spreadsheet a little bit easier. I think that's the last slide in this section. You can advance the slide. Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Julian.
Back to Lauren.
Awesome. I'm just going to do a quick plug for the parallel review process that focused on the development regulatory context in the 2 towns. We will be doing a more in-depth presentation about this at the select board meeting next week. So definitely welcome y'all to attend and learn more about this process at that meeting if you're interested. But I just thought I would give a quick overview of what that looked like. So for Clinton and Bolton, we looked at MVP planning reports, zoning bylaws, subdivision rules and regulations, and in Bolton's case, we looked at the housing production plan as well to look at ways that the recommendations that we are making align with those goals stated in the housing production plan. We're also thinking about the ongoing master planning process and how some of the recommendations can be strengthened and supported through that process. But since that plan isn't published yet, we can't speak specifically to its contents. But in the context of the development rules and bylaws regulations in Bolton, we looked at current practices in the documents that we reviewed, and we also reviewed best practices with local context and opportunities in mind. Then we identified examples from other Massachusetts cities and towns similar to the wetlands process to point to some sort of the best examples that we could find that are currently available. And we also drew on the MACC survey that Jillian talked about earlier and the map that showed communities that had either adopted regulations or were considering it. That survey also asked a question about whether communities had adopted climate-focused updates to their bylaws and regs that were not wetland specific. And so we were able to draw on that survey response to identify some of the towns that we looked at for examples. We also refer to some key resources, including some of the ones that Jillian already mentioned, the Mass Audubon Low Impact Development Bylaw Review Tool and the MAPC Climate Resilient Land Use Strategies Tool, as well as the Smart Growth, Smart Energy Toolkit from the state, and the Sustainable Development Code, which is a really great resource that has several different modules. We focused on the environmental health and natural hazards modules and the land use and community character modules here. Definitely recommend checking those out. And so the last slide I have here is just to give you a flavor of what these documents look like. Up top is the opportunity matrix with a little snapshot of the section on the zoning bylaw. You'll notice that the column with examples has links highlighted. And so those links point to bookmarks in this document on the bottom, which is the supplementary examples. And the examples cover the sort of different general topics that are addressed in the matrix, with the specific examples summarized and the full bylaws and regulations linked to, so they're easy to navigate. So that's all we have for the committee tonight. We really appreciate your time, and we'd be happy to take questions, as well as follow up with anything more specific, and we've included our emails here.
Thank you, Lauren and Jillian. I appreciate it, and I very much enjoy working with both of you and our respective team on both the Apple Country project and this project. I can say there has been a substantial amount of work from our consultants and volunteers working to ensure that this project really is speaking from the community, both on our forests and the regulations, the bylaw, and then as Lauren had already given a preview or a taste of, which is the turf management coming this soon coming year. So I do appreciate your time this evening as well. And I will also be part of the select board meeting at their next meeting next week. So we hope to see those who are interested at that meeting to learn the other things that are going on at the same time. That may not be necessarily something that you see on the website, but it's on in the background. And I also encourage you to visit the project website, because there's a lot of great information, but also on the existing project, but also some information that has not only informed this process, but informs other towns and municipalities that are working on various things as well. So with that, Ms. Chair for the evening is Emily Winter, just to note for those in attendance. I'm not sure if there are questions from the public or from commission members at this time for Jillian and Lauren before we let them go.
Any questions, comments? Thank you. That was a really wonderful presentation. So thank you for taking the time tonight.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure, and I'm going to look forward to working with you all more closely as we progress and as we get these models, sort of generic models, completed and move into the phase of working with you to tailor something specific to Bolton. Yeah.
That's true. And I will send out that wonderful matrices again so that the members have it again.
And so if people have comments, perhaps you could email your comments to Rebecca and then she can send them to us. And because matrix Excel spreadsheets are not too good about putting comments in them, if you could just reference the line in the column that you're commenting on and put it separate, don't try to put it into the matrix itself. That would be great.
Great. Thank you for that reminder, Jillian.
Sure. Okay,
Great.
thanks.
Thank you both.
Good night.
Well, have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing regarding an abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for 580 Main Street. Do we have an update, Rebecca?
Tom Schutz is present, and the update we have is that commission members went out on a preliminary site visit to review both the plans in the field and walk some of the resource areas. That was Tuesday, April 5th. I did not receive any questions from the commission at this time, but due to the amount of members present, questions were not asked on site. So therefore, I would like to provide an opportunity, if the chair so would allow, for commission members to ask questions if they would like. I will say that the site is large. There are a lot of different resource areas, not only a large extent of resource areas covering the site. There was a note about the perennial stream towards the rear, as it was flooded at the time. Since there has been a breach of a beaver dam, which was permitted by the Conservation Commission. And so my suggestion while we were on site was for the applicant's wetland scientists to go back out on site and see if they were able to locate the mean annual high water line or the bank, now that the conditions have receded slightly. My other question, or a couple other things that I noted on site were over to the, over to the west of the, or southwest of the property, there was a bordering vegetated wetland flagged, but then in an area of an old access pathway, the flagging did not continue across. And I was just curious as to why. In addition to that, some of the resource areas along that same area there were a couple locations, I guess, where the vegetation extended beyond where the flagging was, but not extensively, maybe by about 10 feet. Then around what's listed as a stormwater management feature to the south of the parcel, so towards the rear of the existing structure of 580 Main Street and to the rear of the parking area there, that was allowed to be maintained to access the weirs, at least the berm was. But when we were out on site, it was noted that the BVW seems to carry all the way to the weir versus dropping between. Additionally, on the set of plans that was submitted, the BVW seemed to be incorporated all the way to the edge of the parking area. And so I would just like some clarification for the commission on, is the applicant hoping to delineate that as a non-jurisdictional BVW or jurisdictional BVW? So just some clarification from the applicant on the ask on that particular item. Then we continued around and walked the extent of the perennial stream the floodplain was not marked on site, but that's an elevation-based jurisdiction. There were 2 areas within the floodplain that carried a different vegetation type. And I would suggest to the commission to have soil pits done adjacent to or within these areas to ensure that it does not meet any jurisdictional area or it doesn't have a direct hydrologic connection. Then we went around the flagging associated with the stormwater system towards the northeast of the property, towards Route 117. And that was well delineated. The only question that there was related to one flag. There was a down tree, so you couldn't really see under the tree, obviously, where the where the bank was, but that was just something that was noted that the applicant may have to explain if the commission had a question on that. I thought it was fine. Then the other areas that we looked at were the isolated vegetated wetlands, or as they've labeled them on their plans that were submitted. One of them seems to be a stormwater system, but the isolated vegetated wetlands associated with Series C, there was some conversation in the fields that if the other isolated wetland overtopped, it then feeds the C series, but it seemed as though it was in fact isolated and not overtopping when we're on site, where the other area, you could clearly see a defined area. You could see stormwater infrastructure associated with it. So that was just another thing that was brought up, but on the plans, it does show that it's isolated vegetated wetlands and highlighting as bylaw only. My last note for now, being on site, is that actually across the access road, so as you enter into 580 Main from 117, on the right-hand side, there's a substantial amount of area that could be wetland resource area. Some of it is on the 580 Main parcel, but most of it is on the senior housing or Bolton Manor, however you would like to refer to that. Did I lose you, or are you still here? Okay, I froze for a second, sorry. So the reason why that may be relevant to include is if in fact it impacts any of the current access pathway regarding the 100-foot buffer and any BVW that might be associated with it, because the vegetation seems to be very similar to what was flagged over to the southwestern corner or the western corner of the parcel. So that was my update and overview of the site visit. I encourage other commission members, if they have questions, to bring them up so that the applicant might be able to address them.
Okay, I had to leave the site visit early, unfortunately, so I don't have any additional comments or questions at this time, but I will ask if any other commission members do.
I have no more questions, Emily.
Okay. Rebecca, should I ask the applicant if they would like to respond at this point?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. What did she say? Yes?
She said yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. I will now ask the applicant if they would like to respond or comment on what Rebecca has stated.
Absolutely. So good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Schutz, and I'm with Goddard Consulting here on behalf of the applicant at 580 Main Street. Do you mind if I share my screen? I just have a series of photos and just trying to give an orientation on the plans just to help everybody out here.
You should be able to share. There you go.
Okay, so to start, we are going to be looking at the southwest corner right before the ball field down there, or soccer field. This was Rebecca's first note, as she believed that the bordering vegetated wetland should have gone all the way across the access path there and then into this section over here. As you know, we did get a large rainstorm last night, so today I went out and did some test pits. Here you can see my auger in the ground. This is just a large rut from use for access to the field right here. These ruts have created a sort of low point, which allows water to pool and perhaps drain out of this area right here. My auger has little lines, which you can see right here. That is 6-inch lines. And this, at this point, is up to 24 inches into the ground. Here we have a soil taken from this hole right here. This is what I would consider an upland soil. So we can assume that there is an upland break between this bordering vegetated wetland, which would be right here, and then this side right here, which is this bordering vegetated wetland. I went over to the other side here. You can see my original hole on this one. And then I did another test pit in this section right here. You can see we're looking north towards the access road, as we recall on the site visit. We have another section, maybe it may not be the best photo in the world, but we can see it here is another upland soil. We can see the orange texture in that. And finally, here we have a third, which is to the east of where this other photo was just taken. And we can see a similar soil horizon here, which starts with a 10YR22 topsoil here, and then goes down into another maybe 10YR, we'll call it a 6-4. And this is an orangey upland soil, which is similar to what can be found in the rest of the uplands on site. Okay, these are just more pictures of the ruts that can be found that we saw on our site visit, which is acting as low points and allowing the water to pool in these areas, which isn't considered a wetland per se. It's just a pooling of stormwater as it runs across the fields. In the background here, we could see the large amount of honeysuckle, which is considered back up in Massachusetts. And that is what the dominant vegetation in this section is. So we did not flag this area because that is the majority of the vegetation is a back up plant. We're now moving towards the stormwater basin here and our bordering vegetated wetland.
Can you go back to slide 5?
Yep, absolutely.
Can you zoom in a little bit? It almost looks like a little stream flowing through there. You can see water actually flowing from one wetland to the other.
Again, this is just stormwater flowage because I believe that the area got almost a quarter or 3/4 of an inch of rain. So these ruts here have created a low area which allow water to flow across, but that is not normal in normal conditions per se. And again, these are upland soil conditions, so this cannot be quantified as a wetland resource, as you need to have soils, vegetation, and topography in order to quantify it as a wetland in Massachusetts under the Wetland Protection Act. We're going to be going again to this bordering vegetated wetland, which Rebecca asked to look at here. She was concerned about this section right here, as the rest of this we are considering bank of stormwater management feature. She was wondering why the flags didn't extend up to this section here. I believe that this one flag, GC69, I believe that is right here to my right, as you can see the cursor here. Yep.
May I just provide one point of clarification? So
yeah, absolutely.
If I miscommunicated what I said, I apologize. What I was asking is, and I appreciate you sharing your screen because it's more clear. So what I was asking is, one, why the flagging did not continue as you were just starting to express, but also why, and when we were out on site, you had said that the BVW flagging continued to the edge of the parking area. which is what had confused me. So if it didn't,
Mhm.
and this is in fact a different flagging that's just showing bank regarding the area between the edge of that, what you have labeled as a stormwater management feature to the parking area, so north on this particular plan image. If that's bank and not BVW, that addresses one of my questions associated with this area, but if it's not and it's BVW flagging, that's what I need to understand as to what you are, what you're classifying that as.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was just going to address that point in a second here. As we know, as we noted on the site walk, this section right here is being managed as part of the stormwater management feature order of conditions and the enforcement order. So we saw these large erosion control mats, which are seen here. These are the large erosion control mats. So when the wetland scientist who flagged this site went out, she was unaware that this pond here was built in an upland area and also had an order of conditions for the maintenance of it, and she flagged as a resource area. However, after looking over the historic aerials and seeing that topography on the USGSs, we are considering this to be a stormwater management feature, even though the flagging goes all the way around as noted here. The flags were just not showing up in the field because they were probably under the erosion control mats. So the flags were just noting the bank of the stormwater management feature, not necessarily the DVW as demarcated down here in this section.
Okay, so just before we move on to the next part, you, on behalf of your applicant, obviously are asking that be delineated as non-jurisdictional and that it's
Correct.
associated. Okay. Just
As
the
associated
area.
with the stormwater management feature.
Okay, thank you.
Just the area shown in green right here, we are asking for that to be considered bordering vegetated wetland, and then everything up here be associated with the stormwater management feature, as that is being maintained under the order of conditions and the enforcement order that was filed for the site.
Tom, I actually have a question going back to the area near the playing fields.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you sparked my memory. When I was out on site, I was curious. You mentioned the honeysuckle, that Japanese honeysuckle, the invasive plant that is growing all around the perimeter of the wetland. I'm just curious if that was considered. You mentioned something about the flagging based on the vegetation there, and the perimeter of that entire wetland is just all invasive growth. So how was that considered in the wetland delineation?
Well, even if it's an invasive, it still has a facultative status, and honeysuckle is a facultative upland plant. So that's how it was demarcated on our delineation there. But not only just the honeysuckle, as that was the most dominant, there was other upland vegetation in there. There was some crabapple, and there was also a bunch of grape species that were also found in that region. So it wasn't just the honeysuckle. I just noted that as because it was the most dominant vegetation up there, and that is an upland plant as shown in the Wetland Protection Act. So that's why I called that one out specifically.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we now are moving on to the stream portion of Rebecca's comments here. And what the last mean annual high water flag is shown here, and it was a bit hard to see in the field as some of them had fallen down, or maybe the stubs were a bit small, and that section had been flooded previously by a beaver. And as Rebecca just spoke to, they were allowed to breach the beaver dam to allow the water to flow through there easier, and perhaps allow somebody to go out there and mark the edge of the stream here, which is not shown on the plans because we looked at historic aerials for this, and we actually approximated the limit of Great Brook in this area. However, I do believe that this is still an accurate representation here. This morning I went out and I crossed Mean Brook here, and we'll look at some pictures as you can actually see the limit past these mean annual high water flags. You can see the stream bank, and then we'll go up and it'll show up into this section here, which is that ponded area below the bottom corner of this stormwater management basin. So if you look back in here, here's just the bottom tip of the stormwater management basin. Here's that beaver dam that we saw while we were out in the field here. And this is the large area of Great Brook that was flooded until the beaver dam was breached. Here we have the mean annual high water of Great Brook, and this I believe to be the limits of the bank and the reaches of it. This is looking southbound towards the ponded area back here. We have the stormwater management feature to our right, which is off camera. We could see stream-like conditions and bank-like conditions right here on the western bank. This is past the main annual high water flags. So right now we are currently, we just were looking at in this area right here, downstream, or sorry, upstream if you're thinking in the context of that way. Just looked at that one. This is moving further up that stream. You could see that there is more defined bank here. This is still past the mean annual high water flags. We weren't able to go out there when the beaver dam was still up because this was flooded and it was dangerous conditions. But now that the beaver dam's down, we can see that the brook has kind of came back to its natural way and is still in the defined straight feature as shown on the plans here. See, we can see it, this still is kind of straight coming down. This is up top here. We can see that there's minimal bordering vegetated wetland in this section. As we have shown on the plan, we're right here kind of coming down. There is more wetland and wetland flags up to the west of this section right here that we were not able to look at in the field. We just didn't actually make it over there, but there are more wetland flags in this section. There's an upland break here, which is designated as the bank of the bordering vegetated wetland. This is the large pond right here, which is actually off of this plan. We were not able to see that on the plan, but this right here would be where the limit of the beaver dam is, and the large pond kind of comes down here towards the south. Rebecca had asked for us to go out and demarcate the edge of the mean or of the Great Brook in this section here. But however, I don't think that's an accurate representation of what Great Brook is in this section. You can see this large beaver dam, which has backed up a large amount of water. And if we look back at these pictures here, we can see how small Great Brook actually is. So we would not be demarcating the edge of this large ponded section as the mean annual high water, just because it's backed up so much by this one beaver dam here. This section could be as large as a river such as the Connecticut, and we know that this watershed is not that large. So this would not be an accurate representation of the mean annual high water of this stream.
Tom,
This is just, yep.
sorry, can you just, again, for orientation purposes, express where that large blockage is?
Yep. So the large blockage is somewhere in this area right down here.
So is it on the property line, or if it's
right around the edge of the property line, correct? Yep.
okay. Thank you.
And then this is looking back towards that pond right here, or the stormwater management feature, as you can sort of make out in the horizon. This is looking towards the south, and as you can see, the ponded conditions due to the beaver dam. We're now going to be moving towards the, I would say, the northeast of the property, and Rebecca had comments on some of the flagging, specifically in this section here and this section here. So we'll look at this here as we come. Right here was where the test pit well was, and we have flags in this section, and I believe she would like to know why it was flagged here, and then in other area it was not flagged in that same area. So here's some more test pit holes that I dug today. Used my auger. Again, we did not find a definitive wetland soil here. We could just pretty much see a topsoil, and these were dug almost to 18 inches here, and we did not find any what I would consider a wetland soil. This was down about 12 inches, and you could see that there is no gray or any dark black. We only have this kind of light brown topsoil, which is consistent with soil that is brought in for grass and for grading purposes. This is GC 39, and this is looking back towards this is looking back south towards this area right here. We're at GC 39, which is right here. We have that large area where the test pit was. Again, this would not be considered a wetland because we can see the honeysuckle here. We don't have a dominance of wetland vegetation as we do in the areas that have been flagged. Mean Brook is right here towards the west of the picture, as you can see it flowing towards the north. This is right here as it connects back to Mean Brook. Rebecca had noted this as she was wondering why in some sections it connected directly to Mean Brook, and in other sections we had BVW bumped out right here. That's because we noted a large amount of white pine and upland species. Here we have some birches, which is an upland species. We have the overhead white pine, and this is why we bounced our wetland line right back and connected to the mean annual high water line that was shown in the field. Here we have some more paper birch, which is a facultative upland status. We have the honeysuckle coming back into play right here. And then we have the white pines again, which are shown in this far section. So as soon as you see the white pines, we can assume that the wetland is not in that location.
I'm gonna go back to I know you've mentioned that the honeysuckle is an upland plant, and then you showed a picture of the multiflora rose and said that based on the vegetation. I have multiflora rose growing in a stream in my backyard. So I guess I'm a little concerned about the fact that we're basing wetland flagging on the presence of invasive species that are technically upland plants. I also have honeysuckle growing around what I think is a vernal pool on the property behind me. So I'm just want to make sure that other things were considered, and it wasn't just saying, okay, there's multiflora rose growing here, there's honeysuckle growing here, those are upland vegetation, that other considerations were taken in those areas.
Absolutely, and that's why we've looked at soils as well. I've showed you a photo of all the soils as we've gone. All the soils that we have demarcated as upland have upland features, and then the wetland features, which would be a grayish soil in this property, that have been shown inside of the wetland. So it's not just the vegetation, as DEP does require you have to have a soil and a vegetation dominance in order for it to be a wetland. So we're going off both of those in this delineation here.
Okay, and then going back to the augers that you showed earlier, one was at 12 inches and one was at 18 inches.
Yep.
I guess the 12-inch depth makes me a little nervous. Just I don't know what the original scope of work was when this business park went in, and what kind of regrading was done in those areas. But I don't know if other commission members have concerns with that, with the auger that was taken at 12 inches, if that much fill could have been brought in that area. Rebecca, I guess I would ask you if you think that was a sufficient depth for the auger, given the fact that area may have been infilled or leveled out for grass. I don't know. That's just one concern.
I think on any site that's already been developed in the past, that is a concern, and it's a valid one. I think that's why I was suggesting, not specific to the area you're talking about, but the commission can certainly request it. But the areas that I was referring to, why you would do a soil pit versus just an auger, because an auger that is used and frequently acceptable. But on a site with so many resource areas where it was ag field, now it's changed to use to a commercial property. You've had over time an area of lawn that maybe or may not has encroached upon the resource area. I'm not saying it has, I'm not saying it hasn't. What I'm describing here are different alterations and disturbances on a site. I think it's valid to request a test pit versus just an auger, because it's showing you a larger area and it's showing you the full set of horizon versus one specific relatively small location. The short answer is I don't necessarily disagree with a 12-inch depth auger soil sample in general, but I think it's also valid to either take multiple at the same site or while the commission's present, so that the commission understands what's going on, or do a soil pit, which allows, again, for a larger area and to see basically the full story of what's going on there versus just the top. And that would be my feedback on that. Emily, I don't know if that answers your question.
Does, thank you.
Okay, yep.
Sorry, Tom.
Oh, it's okay. I don't know if you had any further questions with that, Emily, if I can move on to my next section.
Yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Next, Rebecca had noted this section right here, which is GC 21 through GC 23. Here, it's really hard to see, but this is GC 22, right on the edge of the lawn and what we demarcated as the bordering vegetated wetland in this section right here. She was wondering why it bounced straight in instead of continuing on the edge of lawn here. It's a bit hard to see, but we did have a lot of species, which we do have a little bit of an issue with. We do have a lot of honeysuckle in this section. We now have a little bit of bittersweet, which is an upland plant, which is considered to only be found in the uplands. That can be found in this section. We do have fox grape, which is a native grape species, which is an upland species as well. That's why this is bouncing straight in here. Here's just some more picture of the vegetation. We can also see some white pine coming up in the back right here. Behind the white pine is the Great Brook, which is not being able to see in this photo, unfortunately, just because of how dense the vegetation in this section was.
Did you do
Were
any
any
auger
soil-
samples back there?
Yep. Here's we'll get to that in just a second here. We're just going to be looking at, this is just a final photo. It just took a lot of photos today. This is just a final photo of this white pine growing here. You only found that in the upland in this site, so that's why I took a photo of this one. We also have some tall goldenrod, which is a facultative upland plant. So, and we have the wetland, which is diving down towards the east over here and making its way across. You can kind of see a blue flag in this section right here.
Tom, did you take any soil augers in that area where you had the honeysuckle, the bittersweet, the grapevines?
Yep, this was taken right at GC 22. And as you can see, it's that same upland soil horizon that we saw down in the southwest bordering vegetated wetland break. You can see it goes from a 10YR22 to maybe a 10YR 56. And it's very gravelly. So this would be what I would consider an upland soil as well. You might note that there is a little water, but that's just the rain from last night kind of seeping into the soil and then just going down into the groundwater table well below this upland break here. Next, we'll be going to this pond. Rebecca had noted the down tree right here and that there is a wetland flag. That was, I believe that was after much of the commission had left. So there's a downed willow that is sitting right here, and we were demarcating the edge of the wetlands, and she was unsure what was beneath the willow. So I made sure to climb on it today, take some photos. This is the flag right here that was in question, as she noted that maybe it was too low and she was unsure if there was water below it. However, there is no water. The water is more towards the left right here, as we'll see in further pictures. This is looking straight down at the flag. It's a bit hard to see, but you can kind of see that this is soil down here and maybe some organic material from all the vines and this tree coming down. And then if we look towards the left, we can see the water is actually kind of further down the bank than where our flag is. The flag is directly behind the photo right now. We're now jumping to the two isolated wetland systems right here, and where we're calling to have an upland break in this section right here. This was also after the majority of the commission had left. This is C2. That is right here, which is the bottommost point of this isolated wetland in the northern section. This is the upland break as we get the Japanese honeysuckle in there again. Here's some more of it. It's just a very dense stand, as we didn't see that anywhere else in the wetland. We also have these large aspens here, which is an upland plant. It's a native plant, and these are extremely large, and they're only found in the uplands. Here's another one right here. These were found directly in the middle of the break between the two isolated wetlands. And as you could tell, these are very large trees, so they are quite old. So they were going to be there for a while, even if these two stormwater detention basins, or what we're calling as those, were built. This section right here was left to be naturalized with the two aspens that have been there for quite a while. This is looking towards the west. As you can see, this is an upland pine forest, which is just another photo just to try and get everybody's head in the same section and try and give everybody a feel of what they missed during the site walk. Right here is the edge of the wetland. You can kind of see it wrapping around and then diving back in. This is the southern wetland edge. Here we have test pit holes. I'll show you that on the plan where I took those. Those are taken right here. It's a little bit of, it goes from this flag down to this flag, down to this flag, and they're taken right in the middle here. Sorry about this, it's just going back. I got a lot of slides. This is a very gravelly kind of topsoil material in this entire section. This is showing where the flag was. Again, this is just a very gravelly topsoil with 10YR22, which again, I would consider an upland soil. Here we have this, this old stormwater detention basin, which we're considering an isolated wetland here. You can see it, the water all kind of just sits in this little depression. This is looking more towards the south in the middle of the stormwater basin, an isolated wetland. And then this is looking towards the east here, and you can see that this is the pipe that used to connect to through this berm here into his other side, and that is part of the stormwater management features. However, at this point, this wetland doesn't actually connect over to the other side unless there's a lot of water in it, and this is probably the maximum amount of water that can be held in this wetland at this point. I hope that answered all your questions.
Just a point of clarification on this one too.
Yep.
So this is the B series, the photo you have up right now.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask two separate questions then to make sure that I understand the request. So
that is looking this way.
Yes. So you on behalf of your client are asking that be delineated, delineated, I'm talking about the B series at this time, as non-jurisdictional under the Bylaw and Wetlands Protection Act?
No, we're considering that just an isolated vegetated wetland, an old detention basin.
Okay, so even though it's a detention basin, you're still currently under the bylaw, it's isolated vegetated wetland. That's the way you're requesting it be delineated.
Correct.
Okay, and then same thing for the C series?
Yep, these two are both in the same boat.
Okay, thank you.
And you had just reminded me, you had made one more point about those two depressions out in the bordering land subject to flooding. Those two areas, Phil had noted that those were two old test pit holes that just hadn't been filled in. So that's why it might have had a little bit more of, might have had some water in it and some vegetation just growing around it, but those are also non-jurisdictional. It's just an old test pit hole.
So where are you talking about the test pit holes being located?
It was in this section right here.
Okay, so those weren't the areas I was talking about. The area, although I appreciate that note. So the area that I was referring to was actually to the south of the existing building. So to the rear of the existing building, not here. So this is more southwest. So we're looking at the area that's adjacent to the propane tank, the concrete pad with tower, and it's within the floodplain, within what you have as 100 Riverfront buffer. That should be riverfront area. And then within the 100-foot buffer as well. So there were two on site. I was walking in circles trying to get a GPS of them. So that was the area that I was inquiring about in terms of an area that might be helpful to get a soil pit done in, because there is a very distinct vegetation change as far as the type of grass that's growing there, along with it's a slight topographical change and clearly holding water. But again, I didn't look at the soil, so I don't know if they're hydric soils or not. But so just understanding if that is jurisdictional, and if that is jurisdictional, we need to see that on, the commission would need to see that on the plans. And what in my mindset, I know isolated, they're probably not jurisdictional, but they may be hydrologically connected between what I'm seeing in the field as two potentially separate. And that again is on the other side of the existing structure within the floodplain. But that was the area that I was asking about, not over here, but I'm happy that you clarified over here as well.
Okay, yep, that's something I have to look into further in the field. That must have slipped my mind today when I was out there on site. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I appreciate that.
And I believe that was all the additional questions from Rebecca. If the commission has any further questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions, comments from the rest of the commission? Okay, Rebecca, where do we go from here?
Sure. Sorry, I just dropped my pen, excuse me. The commission can request, so if the commission feels that they are comfortable and with everything that's been delineated on site, there's no questions as to the extent of wetland resource areas, the soils, the hydrology, the hydric vegetation, or the justification that the applicant's representative has provided this evening, the commission could consider approving the delineation of resource area. If the commission has outstanding questions, or if they would like further information or to go out to the site again, that's certainly something that the commission can request. And in that instance, they would request a continuation. The commission also has the ability to request a peer review of resource areas on site if there are any outstanding questions. And that would also be relative to a motion to continue. So that's what the commission has the ability to request, to give the applicant reason as to why they would want to continue and request a continuation from the applicant. The applicant's representative would need to basically assent to that request or be amenable to it. If they are, then the commission can make a motion to continue. If the commission feels they have enough information and they're comfortable with everything delineated on site and everything on the plans, everything that's been presented this evening as well, the commission has the ability to close. The commission also has if the applicant is not amenable to continuing, the commission still would close the hearing this evening. So those are the different avenues. Does that answer your question, Emily?
Yes.
Okay.
Do any commission members have comments based on what Rebecca just stated and what has been presented by the applicant, and questions that have been answered tonight looking for feedback from commission members. If anyone feels that we need more information or we would like to see a peer review done based on the size of the site, there's a lot of resource areas. So if anybody feels like peer review would be necessary or any additional soil tests done, I know that I think it might be helpful to have another site visit personally. And if there were any specific locations that commission members wanted to see soil testing done, even with an auger while we're present, that might be helpful. So just looking for some feedback from other commission members.
I agree with you. I think there was 2 locations I would like to take a look at again also. And one is up near the lacrosse field where that water crosses. And I'm not sure if there's any, rework, construction work done at that spot either, because there seems to be a lot of water there. The time we were there, what was it, Tuesday, there was water crossing that area, and there was water again when these pictures were taken. And then again, behind the beaver dam, the size of that pond, I'd like to get a look at that as that beaver dam has been broken. And I'd like to see, I don't believe there was much water flowing through that break. I think there was about 2 inches of water. That was it. So the pond behind it was not necessarily the size of the Connecticut River, but I think it might be something that has been there for some time. And I'd like to get a better look at that.
Yeah, this is Paul. Given I wasn't able to join the site visit, I feel a little uninformed. Actually, I have to rely on the rest of the members to see if this is sufficient. So I wouldn't mind take part in another visit if possible.
Okay. Anybody else on the commission? Okay, then I would ask the applicant if you would be amenable to another site visit, and if we could potentially maybe do some soil augers while we're out there in locations that commission members would like to, specific locations commission members would like to see more information on. Is that something we could do in the next week?
Yep, that's absolutely fine.
Okay. And did any commission members feel strongly about a peer review, or would a site visit with additional soil augers be sufficient?
I think at this point, it would be sufficient for me.
Okay. All right. So that being said, oh, Rebecca, do we have a DEP number for this project?
We do not as of yet. Tom, did you receive anything yet?
I did not receive anything for this, no.
Okay. So what I will do tomorrow as well is send an email to DEP and see where they are on that. But so Tom, you are then amenable to a continuation until the next Concom meeting?
Yep, I'm amenable to that.
Okay. All right, Emily.
And then we can coordinate a time for a site visit, maybe next week or,
Yep.
or later this week, whatever, based on people's availability. Okay, so I would like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing until the next Conservation Commission meeting on, need to look at my calendar here,
May 3rd.
May 3rd. Okay, and do we have a time slot available?
This one, I think we're at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Okay,
Yep.
so May 3rd at 8 o'clock. Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. What do I, Rebecca? I'm sorry. I haven't done this
That's
in 3
okay.
years.
So then
We continued. I need to get all in favor, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then take, once you hear everyone's, then you do a roll call. Because we're on Zoom, you have to call everyone individually.
Okay. All right, so all those in favor, start with Paul.
Aye.
I don't know who's on tonight. Lori?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
And yourself.
And I'm an aye as well.
Great, thank you. All right, Tom, I will reach out to you and coordinate a site visit.
Sounds good. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
you too. Okay. Just looking at our. Okay. We will now open, right? Open, sorry. Okay. Okay, we will now open the public hearing for request for determination of applicability for Forbush Mill Road, Department of Public Works. Do we have an update, Rebecca?
Yes, Randy is present, and I'm not sure if he has other representatives with him, but I would ask through you, Ms. Chair, that he provide a summary of the proposed work and the proposed location.
Yes, and I will open this up to Randy.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. Yeah, we have on here with us tonight, Rick Canavan from Time Bond. He's a consultant that the town has hired to perform the design for the Forbush Mill Road culvert replacement. I think he was on earlier. Rick, are you on?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Randy. So yeah, I'm Rick Hanavan. I'm a professional wetland scientist with Time Bond. You know, I could give you a rundown unless you want to. I mean, I think Randy, you can also speak to this, but this is a request for determination for geotechnical borings only. So as Randy noted, Time Bond's been hired by the town to design a replacement for this culvert. This has had some storms damage in the past. Randy, probably better to give you the history on that than I could, and you all may be also more aware of some of the repairs that have happened at this location. Geotechnical borings are an exempt minor activity under the Wetlands Protection Act, but are not exempt under the bylaw. So we're requesting a negative determination to get the geotechnical information. This would be used to design the abutments, and then as we have that design, we would be back in front of you for a notice of intent, you know, to get an order of conditions for the actual bridge. So the proposed work here is, you know, putting two holes in the ground, either in the shoulder of the road or in the road, just on either side of this crossing. Should be, you know, as it is a minor activity on the Wetlands Protection Act, it's relatively minor.
Madam Chair, if you'd like to give me if I'd like to give you a little background, if that's okay.
Yes,
This
please.
is a culvert that was replaced probably 2, maybe 3 years ago as a temporary culvert replacement. I believe there was an enforcement order issued by the commission for that work. Culvert that's installed is a 36-inch diameter, smooth interior. This is the culvert just before the entrance to the transfer station as you're coming from 117 or Main Street. We have to come up with a permanent replacement for that structure, and this boring work is necessary for the design of that culvert, so the engineers can appropriately design the crossing that's intended to be there. Together with this, I mentioned we're doing a complete H&H study of all of the drainage structures on Forbush Mill Road to ensure, number one, to get a better understanding of the capacities of each of the culverts, because they're going to be all need to be replaced within, I think, a relatively short period of time. And also to ensure that the replacement culvert that we're planning for the permanent culvert that we're planning, that they were just currently designing for, will be appropriately sized for the watershed. Doing a complete H&H study also opens us up to some additional funding opportunities that may become available. So other than that, I guess we'll open up to the commission with any questions they may have.
And one thing to just highlight is Randy's talking about an H&E study. It's a holistic approach for those who aren't familiar with the entirety along Forbush Mill Road. So this is very proactive and insightful because, as Randy just noted, the temporary crossing at the location where this RDA is proposed currently, it does not meet stream water crossing standards. So that's part of the reason why we have to bring it to change it, along with accommodating the flow and the watershed, as Randy stated. However, we have, if you're familiar with Forbush Mill Road, we have them up gradient and down gradient, and then eventually we fall into the area of critical environmental concern. So it starts up by, I think, Wilder Road, or the backside of Wilder Road. There's a large pond there, and then it continues down. So the H&H analysis will be of great value. And I did want to note that, along with the other benefits that Randy had mentioned. But this tonight is just for the technical test borings within the right of way.
Okay, do any commission members have comments, questions, concerns?
No, I'm all set.
And I guess you mentioned, Rick, that the test borings would be done either in the roadway or on stream bank.
Yeah, just on it's probably in the shoulder of the road, so not in the bank. So we had attached a plan with the RDA form. It was actually the plan for this temporary culvert that Randy was describing. So part of, the geotechnical borings, as was mentioned, is part of our design process. So we're also going to be redelineating the wetlands, getting surveys so that we get the elevations right. So that, that's a key part of the hydraulics to be understanding what the different flood elevations are through this section, and being able to model the river, looking at the river sections upstream and downstream. So the plan that's attached to this RDA is pretty preliminary, because we're just at that early stage of design. But the locations of the borings are, one is in the pavement and one is just off the pavement. But none are in regulated area. They're both in the roadway fill.
I just have one very minor question. What happens to the material that comes out during the, for the boring?
Yeah, there's some of it may be collected as samples for the geotech analysis. And then the holes are refilled with the material, and they have a little pavement patch. But yeah, the material is contained in, the drillers need to keep the material, as they're pulling it out. Sometimes, some of it may be collected as a sample, and the rest needs to be contained by the drill rig in the road, and then either put back in the hole or removed from the site.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have one. Did you have proposed erosion control on the plan?
No, because the plan is solely marking we show the dig safe and the holes. I mean, it would be fine to condition this, or otherwise, we will tell the drillers to have, it's typically like a wattle. I mean, you're in, especially with pavement, it's kind of hard to stake, but yep. That's a standard practice with a driller anyways, to have some kind of control like that. And they may be putting just drill cuttings onto, also like a piece of plywood. I mean, so they they're generally managing their drill cuttings for this type of erosion control, and just also so they're not making a mess. But that's very fair to condition this and or just give us some direction that we can make sure we pass on to the driller.
Okay.
Rick, just a quick question. How deep do you anticipate the borings have to go?
So I'm the well scientist and not the geotech.
Okay.
I don't, yeah, I would be guessing. I'm sorry. And some of that I think is, we have the person who's going to be in the field is typically a geotechnical engineer or a geologist, and they may be, like for trying to figure out what's the solid material you can put this on. So it may be longer if you don't hit bedrock, but it could be that if as soon they get to rock, they know they're good with the structure. So but again, that's sort of just from past bridge experience, and I am the wild scientist and not the geotech, so I don't know.
Okay. Just for a point of for the conservation, for the commission, we hired Time Bonds, I think it was earlier this year, to do the final design. The preliminary design was done by a different engineering firm, Bayside, which is the plan that was provided to the commission as an attachment to the RDA. In their evaluation, without looking at the H&H, in their evaluation, they deemed a 4x8 culvert was probably the size it was going to be for permanent. So I don't know for certain, but the depth of the hole is probably going to be, has to be at least 4 feet, because it's plus some cover over the pipe. So it's going to be 6 or 8, 10 feet, something like that. Just give you an indication of how deep. And borings are typically like 4-inch diameter or 6-inch diameter, no bigger than that, fairly small.
Okay. Just going back, Rebecca, to your question about erosion control, and then what we were talking about with material. I don't know how we want to condition the material stockpiling. I mean, it sounds like it's not going to be a lot. If there's a certain location, or Rick had mentioned putting it on plywood is a standard practice. I don't know how the commission would like to condition that.
If I may, the commission, if they are considering issuing a determination with conditions, which would be a -3 determination, the commission in the past has stated that the erosion controls shall be in place prior to and during construction. You can name it as a wattle. So you can say wattles to be in place prior. You can also leave it as erosion control. So then if the drill rig operator has a specific kind of erosion control that they find works best, then they're not limited. Then you could also add a condition if you would like me to go out and just inspect the erosion control prior. That can also be prior to construction starting. That can be a condition. And then you could also add a condition about stockpiling of material shall be maintained within the existing paved right-of-way, or you could just say stockpiling of material shall occur outside of resource areas or jurisdictional areas. And then again, that may provide more flexibility, but that's also, it should be brought across if you're requesting that it be within the paved right of way. It may be an overlap of a jurisdictional area, but again, being within the paved right of way, it's maintaining an area, and then it's not entering into the resource areas directly adjacent to that paved way.
if I can pick up on that thread, like because of riverfront area, like the roadway may be a resource area. So if I could recommend or request that you follow the thread of stockpiling soil and pavement as opposed to not in any resource area, because the road itself may be a resource area there. Same with, it could be, it's BLSF potentially as well. Sorry, I had a second comment on that. The prior, like, I would be happy to have your group and Rebecca look at this, but because it's in roadway, they'll be doing traffic control, but they'll be putting the wattle around their, like Randy said, whatever, it's on the scale of 6 inches or less, boring hole right as they're getting started. So it's a little different than a site where you would have somebody install the erosion controls and you go walk it, because it's a roadway, prior is going to be like very short.
Mhm.
I think you could still use prior, but just be aware that it's not like you're not gonna be able to go look at it the day before, because you don't want to have like a wattle just
Yeah.
across the lane of this road the day before.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, I've been out on sites where it's a test well, and we're going out looking the day of, and you know what, if it's not in place and things aren't in order, then it doesn't happen. So, but I do appreciate that where it's within the right of way, it's going to be happening fairly quickly. And with that, that's exactly why when you just mentioned the resource area overlap, that's exactly why I was relaying that. They can say out of the jurisdictional area, and the reason why I wasn't not including that is because the transfer station is right there. Otherwise, I wouldn't even put that out there. But just to note, but I do appreciate you highlighting those as well.
Do any commission members feel strongly one way or the other about Rebecca inspecting the erosion control prior to the borings? Sounds like the erosion control will be placed during the boring and fill and then be removed. Commission members, would you like to see Rebecca out there on site to inspect, or are we comfortable saying erosion control in place during borings?
I'm happy with just erosion control. You got DPW there at the same time. I'm sure they're capable of handling what's going on. It's not a major deal.
Rebecca, do I, when I propose the -3 determination, do I include the conditions then, or do I do that? Okay. Okay. Then that being said, I would like to propose issuing a -3 determination for the request for determination of applicability for 4 Bush Mill Road, geotechnical test borings with the following conditions: erosion, wattle or similar erosion controls in place during boring, during geotechnical test borings, and stockpiling of material shall be in the existing paved right of way, or within. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Now I close it, right, Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to make a motion that we close the request for determination of applicability for 4 Bush Mill Road, geotechnical test borings. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well.
To
Thank you.
note, that was actually backwards, but I think we're all comfortable and clear about what just occurred.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did send, the borings are tentatively scheduled for May the 10th. I said, just to send Rebecca an invite as a reminder. So she's more than welcome to come out and take a look at it. So.
Yeah.
she's
I mean,
interested.
if you have it covered,
I won't be, I won't, unfortunately, I won't be in that day. So.
oh, maybe
We
I
will, we
will.
will have
There'll
somebody
be a,
logging the
I'm going to be
borings.
relying upon,
Yeah.
the representative from Time Bond that's out on site.
All right, this was May 10th, you said?
Yeah, I just sent you an invite.
Okay, great. I will see you tomorrow then. Wonderful. Emily, you want to go to the next RDA?
We'll open the next. Okay, would now like to open the public hearing for the request for determination of applicability for Route 110 Still River Road. Department of Public Works on behalf of Mass DOT. Resurfacing Still River Road from Lancaster Town Line under the Municipal Pavement Program. Can I ask Randy to go ahead and Rebecca? Okay. Randy, would you like to give us an update?
Sure. Thank you very much. We have, Town of Bolton has been, the New Hampshire DOT will be resurfacing Route 110 on our behalf, which is great news. It's about a $600,000 piece of pavement right there. So a couple weeks ago, I received the agreement from the New Hampshire DOT, and one of the items in the DOT was the town was responsible for the permitting, and I went, uh-oh. The work is pretty straightforward. Basically, they're going to be milling the road, cold planing the road, taking 2 inches of existing pavement off the top and replacing it back 2 inches. It's going to go from the Lancaster Town Line to the Harvard Town Line, right through. They're leaving out the section at intersection 117 and 110. They're leaving out that section where it looks like it was done a few years ago. They're going up to those existing joints. Pretty much they're going to be paving, like I mentioned, taking out 2 inches of fine milling and replacing 2 inches of hot mix asphalt, 12.5 millimeter. When they do milling, they generally go right down the road. It's a process. They mill the road, dumps it immediately into a dump truck, and generally the sweeper is following the milling machine. That will remain for approximately two to 3 weeks. Right now, they're tentatively scheduled to pave the road the middle of May. It's all subject to weather. Cold planing may occur as quick as the end of this week, if it's okay with the commission. Under the contract with the contractor, there is line items for water. So if the commission feels a necessity to install wattles in certain areas, sediment controlled areas, there is a line item there. They don't have an awful lot estimated in Bolton, but they were considering it as an exempt activity under the State Wetlands Act, as opposed to just the local regulations. So with that, I'll entertain questions.
I'm just thinking scope with regard to resource areas along Still River Road. And I'll ask other commission members their thoughts, but definitely with regard to erosion control. It sounds like material goes right into a dump truck during the milling, but still concerns about material migrating into wetlands, streams, etc. But I'll ask if other commission members have questions, comments, similar concerns.
How many crossings do we have along that route?
Culverts, drains, or actual waterways?
All the above, anything that we would need any kind of protection for?
The largest waterway that I can think of is north of 117. 117 intersection, and it's I can't think of. I'm trying to visualize where it actually is physically located. There's a house on the left. I think Rebecca had mentioned the gentleman had called one. I can't think of.
Yeah. So with I know where you're talking about, and without straining on this, because I don't have the address at the top of my head, is that something we could put a wattle or some sort of erosion control, because that is actually probably the location I'm most concerned with because of the steep drop off on either side of the roadway just above the culvert.
I think it's feasible.
Okay.
As you're heading out of town on the right hand side, there's a number of driveways there
Yep.
that I think would be I won't say an obstacle, which would make proper placement of the wattles a challenge, but I think it could be done. There's guardrails there. They could be installed on the back side of the guardrails, I think pretty easily. And that would be on the east side of the road, and on the west side of the road similarly. I think we could do that. That should not be a problem.
I'm also thinking just south of the Harvard town line.
Yep.
Is another area of concern for me. I would say anywhere where we're crossing a waterway or have wetland resource areas adjacent to the road. I think those would be, I'm just trying to think of along Still River Road, what we have, but definitely, as Rebecca mentioned, and then just south of the Harvard town line.
South of it, just on the same side as Vaughn Hill. Is that what you're thinking? Well, right in the vicinity where they're building a new house.
Yeah, on either side of the road there. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Randy, they're stopping at the Harvard town line, correct?
Yes.
So that
I believe that to be the case. I don't think they're going any further.
So just the point of clarification there, which I've learned over the past couple of years, the culvert, to my understanding, on what was perceived as the town line is actually in Harvard. So I think certainly we could, or the commission could request that the wattle, which it sounds like Randy's amenable to, be placed on either side, same thing with the guardrail in Bolton, and then the area right at the corner of Still River and Vaughn Hill, where there's a substantial wetland and vernal pool right there. Okay.
Yeah, that's no problem. On the right-hand side there. Yeah.
Okay, Rebecca, if I'm going to condition that, do I need specific locations?
You also have Still River crossing, Still River Road near Forbush.
Yep. Yeah, so we're going all the way to Lancaster.
That is in Lancaster. So that's not in what's being described as the current limit of work within the town of Bolton. But I think that's definitely, Bill, a good point as well, because there are wetlands. And I'm not recalling exactly where the town line cuts through there.
No, it's the first house on Still River as you're heading north.
Yeah.
There's a house on the right-hand side. Not the first house, it's like the second house is a stone bound right there that has right by their driveway.
Oh, okay. I do know that.
It's quite a ways up. It's quite a ways up. The DOT is also paving in Lancaster. So I'm assuming this is occurring with the same process as occurring with the Lancaster Conservation.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah, they're actually starting in Clinton and coming right up through.
So the two major locations were at north of 117. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
So I would say north of 117. You could say
Before North Hill, before Norris Road.
on
Yeah.
east and west sides of the road,
Yep.
right? And then
Yes.
Before
south,
before Nashua Road. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, so
And then south of the Harvard Bolton town line at the corner of Vaughn and Still River.
corner of Vaughn and Still River. And the first one you said was just before Nashua. So I'll just say south of Nashua Road.
Yep. And then
Okay,
I would also just note where Still River crosses Forbush, because if they review this permit, they may note that if Lancaster didn't pick it up.
okay. Okay, and where's Still River? So we have south of Nashua Road, east and west sides of the road, and then south of the Harvard Bolton town line at the corner of Vaughn Hills and Still River Road. We said both sides of the road there, correct?
Yep.
East and
Yep.
west, okay. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns from the commission? Okay, I would like to make a motion that we close the public hearing for the request for determination of applicability for Route 110 Still River Road resurfacing. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well, Rebecca.
Right.
So is this going to be a -3 with conditions?
Yep.
Similar, okay. I would like to make a motion that we issue a -3 determination with the following conditions. That straw wattle or similar erosion controls are placed where the road crosses a resource area at this specific, including the following locations. South of Nashua Road on the east and west sides of Still River Road. And south of the Harvard Bolton town line at the corner of Vaughn Hills and Still River Road on both the east and west sides of the road. And where Still River crosses Forbush Mill Road. Is that good? Everything covered? Okay. Do I hear a second?
Can you explain to me where Still River crosses Forbush Mill Road? Can you explain that again to me, please?
So
That's
Go
the
ahead.
area that's actually in Lancaster. So we're including it again, more for Mass DOT to pick up if they haven't already noted that in Lancaster.
Okay.
So technically Bolton does not have jurisdiction over areas in Lancaster, but we're highlighting that as an area of concern because
And that's okay to highlight it, but I don't think you can say to install the wattles in another jurisdiction, can you?
we can, it's not enforceable. I agree with you, Randy. I agree with you. So the other way, what I can do.
I mean, that's fine. I'll let the DOT engineer know, and I'm sure they'll do it, but.
What we can do as well is include, so as part of the determination, when I draft the when I issue the determination on behalf of the commission and I incorporate what's been discussed this evening in the project description section versus the decision. So the whole thing's the decision. There's a section that talks about the project description. When I talk about the extent of the project, I can highlight it there. And then we don't need to
Okay.
include it as a condition because then it will already be incorporated.
Okay. All
Does
right,
that
that
make more
makes
sense?
sense. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Because then we don't get into the enforceability issue. But it's still highlighted. And I think it is, like I said, relevant to highlight because it's associated with the area of critical environmental concern. That's a shared resource between the two towns. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch.
No, that's fine. No, like I said, I'll mention it to the engineer tomorrow.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, starting with Paul,
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Randy.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
You as well.
Okay, next on the agenda is vote among commission members to consider issuance of fines for an expired order of conditions for Century Mills Estates. Rebecca, do we have an update on this?
The update is that we tabled this discussion from last meeting so that members could review the order of conditions for Century Mill Estates. To be clear, the violations are associated with uncompleted work or ongoing work associated with the expired order of conditions versus just that it is an expired order of conditions. The commission has the ability to issue fines at a rate of $300 per day per violation. Per the local wetland bylaw and associated regulations, and under the Wetlands Protection Act, it does allow for it. Under the bylaw is where it explicitly states the amounts and rate. The commission has the ability to assess those violations and then therefore assess the fines associated with violations, either individually or just for ongoing work within jurisdictional areas and ongoing work under the order without a permit. So this is again for the expired order of conditions associated with Century Mill Estates, which was associated with DEP file number 1120526. The commission has sent notices to the applicant, and we sent it return receipt and certified at first, and then we sent it return receipt certified and registered at the request or at the guidance of the post office, because that requires signature from the individual specifically it's addressed to versus anyone at the residence. And we have received signed documents back showing that they have in fact received these notices. That being said, it's up to the commission, as they had relayed during the original enforcement order, that they would like to visit fines should it be necessary if the individual does not come into compliance. To come into compliance for this particular issue, the applicant would need to file a new notice of intent for all outstanding work associated with the permit, along with file a certificate of compliance for any work that is done in compliance, and with that, reviewing what had been done. The issue is because it's expired, they'd have to get the items that were potentially done in compliance, if any, addressed under the notice of intent, because we can't issue a COC on something that isn't able to be issued a partial or a full certificate of compliance. So the consideration this evening, or the ask of the commission, is what would the commission like to how would the commission like to assess the fines associated with this project? Or do you need to table again to review the order of conditions and associated file?
I would like to ask Rebecca, what work is currently ongoing? With, obviously with exception to phase 1 and 3, which have not started, but what work is currently ongoing under the current order of conditions?
So this is a great question. So I do want to highlight the 2 phases that you just named. So they have been cleared, they have been altered. So they have been started, but they have not been developed beyond site work, I would say, but substantial site work. So I do just want to make that clear, that it's not that they have not been touched, that work has not begun on those phases. It had started, but that has not continued. To address your other question about what is ongoing on site, none of the property has received a partial certificate of compliance, to my understanding. So that means that all work is still ongoing. We had requested from the applicant an update on outstanding items, and they have yet to provide that information. Therefore, I cannot accurately describe what is or is not continuing on site under the expired order of conditions. In total, what I can say is there are still single-family house lots being developed. There is still work associated with the stormwater infrastructure. Other departments are also waiting for those documents showing what has been completed and what has yet to be completed, so that we can properly determine how to move forward. The commission also has the ability, and maybe I can put this on the agenda for the next meeting, I can review what we have received for the original filing fee associated with this project. And the commission may be able to utilize those funds to gather and have a peer review of that site to fully understand, to the best of our ability, what has left to be done and what is done. And then the commission has the ability to then assess and base fines off of that report. Again, that's contingent upon if we have enough funds from the filing fee. So when we collect the filing fees, when permits come in, we have the ability to utilize them towards certain things associated with the project, but I don't know the extent of what something would cost. So the commission may only be receiving a partial. With that, I will say one of the crossings is complete and seems to be stable, but again, I haven't received a report from the past 3 years before COVID. So we were supposed to receive our final review of that crossing prior to COVID, or actually the spring that started. Everything was delayed, so the permit was extended under the extension that was granted due to the pandemic, and that's why it expired December 26th. So I know that wasn't a direct answer to your question, and I apologize, but the commission also has the ability to request a site visit, and I would be happy to do that. I do not know if I will get a response, but I would be happy to try as well.
So one of my questions is, could we issue a cease and desist and stop all construction that is currently ongoing with an expired order of conditions? So that means that houses that are being built, stop, full stop. I guess I am not opposed to fines. I'm just trying to get a response. I know that we haven't had a response for a long time. And I'm wondering if that would be impactful and if that is something that we could even do.
So I would have to review the language of the enforcement order, but from my recollection, I believe there is a current cease and desist.
And
So-
I do
Go
know houses are being built currently. They're in
So-
construction.
So interior work, so new permits have not been issued as far as areas that are jurisdictional. And interior work has not been stopped at this time because it's non-jurisdictional.
Mhm.
But any new building permits would not be issued, or the conservation would not be able to sign off. I would not be signing off for the commission because there's no valid permit. And in addition to that, there is the one site that is a new building that does have a building permit. They have a hold on their permit because of this and some additional things going on as well. So,
Okay.
Yep.
That's good to hear.
I will double check the language though, just to make sure.
I would say if we could, I liked the idea of seeing if there are funds to get peer review, since we aren't getting any information from the landowner. I do want to note one thing, and maybe there just weren't hard copies, but you had said that we haven't had a report in 3 years. I was just looking at the stormwater pollution prevention plan reports, and maybe there just weren't copies, but I didn't see any information from the property owner that things were being inspected on a regular basis. I don't think that has happened in a really long time. So that, and then coupled with the fact that we have not received any updates on completed work under the order of conditions. I think it would be a really good idea if we have the money to get a peer review and get started.
Related to the SWIP reports,
Yeah,
that was coming through the planning board.
okay,
So it has been a lapse in time. I think it was probably a season or two before all the pandemic craziness started, but because they had funding for an inspector to go out, and then the inspector was reviewing that and discussing it with them fairly regularly. So I do have those electronically by accessing the planning board's files, but now we're copied on other subdivision SWIPs, and we're supposed to be copied on these as well, but we aren't getting any, obviously, at this time. And then if you would like to use the peer review approach, what I would suggest is, if the commission is not voting this evening on the issuance of fines because you'd like to wait for the peer review, I would suggest one, stating that for the minutes and tabling the vote if that's what you were going to do. Or you can consider the issuance of fines at this time and then consider them again once you've assessed the site further. But what I would also suggest is a second vote or a second statement or roll call vote to authorize the use of the filing fee associated with this DEP file number for the peer review associated with outstanding work, just so that we have that documented.
Is there any escrow on any of these projects that are completed that we can tap into those?
So yes, the reason why I'm saying the filing fee, because the filing fee is easier to access. I would need to check with council in terms of how to pull, how to utilize the escrow funds where we are not getting a response from the applicant, because typically we would reach out to the applicant, discuss it with them, we would joint authorize and then use those funds.
Well, it just seems like, yeah, that the filing fees, that's our money for any other projects or other,
So just one point of clarification, Lori, for the filing fees that we receive for each project, we
Mhm.
can't use them for other projects, but we can use them on the project that they're collected from, which I
Okay.
found out recently.
okay.
So that's, I agree with you if I didn't know that. But so to that note, what I can do as well, if the commission doesn't or does want to authorize the use of the filing fee for this, what you can also do is make some sort of statement or authorize me to discuss with council the use of escrow funds, and then I can start that discussion, which I think, Lori, that's a really good point. But again, the reason why I did not suggest that at this time is because it's a different process, but I'm more than happy to start that process.
If we went the route, or if we, as a commission, agreed to the peer review, would we not issue fines in the meantime?
No, you can.
We can, okay.
You can, and that's what I'm saying is you can issue fines based on the enforcement order that's already been issued, or once you've provided justification for the fines and basically how you are establishing the rate at which you are issuing them. So basically how many violations is my point. If you are saying it's one violation per day, excuse me, then it would be $300 per day. If it's by category of outstanding items within the order of conditions, then we'd assess it that way. And it would be $300 per day per the amount of categories that are outstanding. But you have to tie it to a specific violation. The second part of that is the commission can make that vote today. They can also authorize me to utilize the filing fee or start coordinating the use of escrow funds and what that process might look like. And with that, the commission has the ability, once a peer review is done or we have our professional go out and assess what's been left outstanding, then the commission has the ability to reassess the fines that are being issued and issue more if relevant, or by some miracle reduce or end fines at that time. But the other thing to note is the fines are really to ensure that it comes into compliance. Once an applicant starts coming into compliance or shows an effort to come into compliance, typically those fines are stopped. That has not been the case here because we've received no response as of yet, other than a signature back confirming that it's been received. But just to note how the enforcement process works.
Okay. I'm going to say that the fact that the order of conditions had expired 4.5 months ago, and there has been no movement by the property owner or response. I personally think we should start fines. And at the same time, I believe that we should look into getting a peer review, since we do not have any information from the property owner on what is complete at this time. I would say starting with the $300 per day violation for an expired order of conditions as a starting point. And then if we find through the peer review that there are multiple outstanding items, then we could.
You froze, Emily. Is everybody else still? Oh yeah, there.
Yeah, still here.
I agree with what Emily's saying. I believe that the 300 a day fine for the expired order sounds appropriate.
Okay.
And like you said, go into the peer review and then go from there if we need to find anything else.
Okay.
Oh, she
Yeah.
unfreezes.
She's back.
Okay.
Rebecca,
Yes.
my computer is overheated. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. Lori agrees with you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so I agree too. And how do you calculate the number of days? Is it every calendar day or is it business days or anything like that?
Great question. So I always double check with the town clerk because I always second guess myself. I believe in Bolton, it's every calendar day, but I will double check with her before. And yes.
So yeah, so we're talking 130 days or something at this point.
Well, so we start now and then.
Is it
Oh, we
today?
start now. Okay.
Yes. Yep. So what Lori had highlighted was she's comfortable with or would also be supportive of a rate of $300 per day for the expired order of conditions, and therefore the outstanding work that is encompassed within that outstanding order. And to follow up with the assessment peer review. So associated with that, then it would be 2 vote or potentially 3 votes. So the first vote would be if the commission would like to consider a motion to issue fines for the expired order of conditions and all outstanding work associated with Century Mill Estates, previously associated with DEP file number 112-0526. The second, at a rate of $300 per day. Sorry if I said that already. The second would be to authorize the conservation agent to utilize the filing fees and to contract a peer review and or assessment of all outstanding work associated with the expired order. By utilizing the filing fee and or escrow funds. I'm hesitant to combine those two regarding the escrow funds or the funds held for this project is what I would prefer that be phrased as in the language used. And you can certainly authorize me being the conservation agent to basically initiate the coordination of the release of escrow or the use of escrow funds, because we wouldn't be releasing them at that time. And the reason why is so that I have 3 clear directives. One is issuing the fines at the rate we discussed. 2 is starting the peer review assessment and seeing what an associated cost might be, and then requesting that to 3 parties, or if we need to put it out to bid, then we have to put it out to bid. And the last would be the escrow fund or the funds being held for this project, which may require council. And I am, something in the back of my mind is saying it may require a town meeting vote as well. So that's why I'm saying I would like to separate those 2 so I can start on the peer review assessment now if we have funds available. And I can simultaneously be working on the escrow use.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
that makes sense to me.
Yep.
Okay. Lori, does that make sense to you?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Now, do we need to do a roll call on each item individually?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Before we do that, does anybody else have anything they want to add or modify? Okay, all right, so. And then do I need to restate the DEP number and all of that when I start the roll call vote, Rebecca?
That would be helpful. You can say as discussed this evening if you're comfortable with the way I've stated it, but it would be helpful if you can restate it.
Okay, so we're gonna take a roll call vote for the expired order of conditions for Century Mills Estates, DEP file number 112-0526. Our first vote is for the issuance of fines at $300 per day for an expired order of conditions. Sorry, I need to now plug my phone in because my phone is about to die. Okay, so sorry, give me 1 second here. All right. Okay, so we're going to take the roll call vote for the issuance of fines at $300 per day for an expired order of conditions. Starting with Paul. Yay is yes, nay is no. Paul?
Aye.
Lori?
Yay.
Bill?
Yay.
And I'm a yay as well. Our second roll call vote is to, I guess, I'm trying to, Rebecca, do I need to give you permission to contract the peer review or just say that we're going to contract a peer review?
You need to authorize me to contract the peer review and authorize the use of the filing fee collected for 112-0526.
Okay. All right. Our second vote will be to authorize the conservation agent, Rebecca, to contract a peer review assessment of outstanding work on the project site and to utilize funds held for the project to, I guess, utilize funds held for the project. Yay or nay, starting with Paul?
Yay.
Lori?
Yay.
Bill?
Yay.
And I'm a yay as well.
Thank you.
Our third vote is to authorize the conservation agent, Rebecca, to initiate coordination of the use of escrow funds for the peer review assessment. Starting with Paul.
Yay.
Lori.
Yay.
Bill.
Yay.
And I am a yay as well.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully I will have an update at the next meeting. Emily, do you want me to run through the other business updates quickly? Actually, we have minutes first.
Yeah,
But-
okay.
okay.
So starting with the minutes.
Yep.
Did anybody have any comments, questions? Oh, did everybody have a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, any comments, questions, concerns?
Not from me.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from the April 5th Conservation Commission meeting. Do I hear a second? Okay, all those in favor? Starting with Paul,
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and Rebecca. I was not present at that meeting.
Okay, so then that is what I had thought before. So we're gonna have to table this until the next meeting because we don't have a quorum to vote on it. Unless
Okay.
you read the minutes and you want to sign our lovely document that says that you read the minutes before today's meeting and you are all caught up.
I did not read the minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate your honesty. So what I would suggest is that you table that until the next meeting.
Okay. We'll table this for review and approve at the next meeting on May 3rd.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. I will run through the updates very quickly if you would like.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we have some events leading up to Earth Day, which is this Friday. All week long, we have the trail-wide, town-wide cleanup. So you are able to bring the bags associated with cleaning the roadsides or trailheads or within the trail as well to the transfer station. Again, during this week only. We had a guided trail walk today. On Thursday, we have a trail work day at Fifeshire Dam Conservation Area off of Wattaquatic Hill Road. That will be invasive species management, cleaning any litter that is associated with the roadside or within the property, and then basically just cutting back the trail to the width that it should be. Then we have on Friday, April 22nd, the event in partnership with the Bolton Public Library. I will be reading a children's story to the group registered there. And then we're going to be doing a wildlife and nature ID STEM activity. And something very exciting I just learned earlier today is that we will also have 2 environmental police officers there to be able to provide some outreach to those in attendance. So come with questions if you are going to be in attendance. Then we have the Nashua River Communities Resilient Lands Management Project going on, which we heard about earlier tonight. I encourage you to visit the website and become engaged if you would like to. We have a few volunteer opportunities, as you heard, with that project. Then we have our volunteer land steward position still open. Please contact me or have any individuals you feel may be interested in that contact me, and I would be happy to provide them with more information. And that is all I have for this evening.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Any other, anything else from the commission members before we close our meeting tonight? Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we close the public meeting for the Conservation Commission of April 19th, 2022. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Paul.
Aye.
Lori.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well.
Wonderful. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thank you.